I'm doing my prelim at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. Nice to meet you all. Please let me know if my connection gets weak at some point. I am doing a rotation in Southeast Africa right now, so I'm on a limited Wi-Fi, but it's so nice to see you all. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, everyone. Seriously, I am super excited for you all. I can't wait. I just had a few questions to start us off, and then I would just wanted to open it up to the rest of the group. So I was hoping, this match season seemed pretty intense and a little scary. What is like one piece of advice that you would give to current applicants for this upcoming match season?
So I guess we could kind of go one by one. I guess one thing for me that really did help are really things like this, going out, meeting anyone and everyone you can. As you can, those who have had exposure to the field, as you can tell, the personalities are very easy to get along with. Everyone is wonderful in the field. Those connections and that networking does go a long way. And I can't tell you how many times I've come across someone on the trail or in some capacity, and I'm just really excited to get to work with them in the future. So any sort of conferences, if you're willing to or able to financially, or any sort of like networking opportunities, away rotations, anything like that to get to have more exposure to the field or people within the field, I think was one really big piece of advice I can kind of give.
Yeah, I want to quickly piggyback off of that because I agree. I think, the saying is closed mouths don't get fed. So you have to be willing to ask for help. I know all of us are very, independent and hard workers, but applying to residency can be tough. And so it is perfectly okay to reach out and ask for that help. Rely on that village and the people around you to get you through that process, whether that's like preparing for interviews, writing your personal statement, submitting your like away rotation applications and things like that. So find that community. I really, this is a representation and rehab event, so of course I'm going to plug them. They have a lot of great opportunities and ways to get involved. We have a Slack group where you can kind of meet and interact with other people. We have mentorship families where you can kind of meet in smaller groups and get advice from residents. We have mock interviews that we did this season that was also very helpful. So there's definitely opportunities to kind of prepare yourself for the interview trail.
I think one thing to add would be just to have the mindset that this is a marathon and not like a short sprint in terms of the third year going to fourth year. There's just so many things to just do all at once, like personal statement, volunteer work, research, you can study for step 2, letters of rec, away rotation. There's just so much all at once, and it can definitely just pile on you. And I think the mindset to have is just to kind of do what you can in a day, and at the day ends, and just start anew the next day, and just try not to do everything all at once, and just be happy if you can, and that's all you can do at the end of the day.
I agree with everything that the team said already. The crazy thing about the season and any season is you don't know what you don't know, and that's a scary thing. But when you surround yourself with a solid group of mentors, friends, colleagues, built by what Lewis said through representation, rehab, or as Sparsh said, conferences, etc., these people can fill in the holes in which you had no idea. So continuing to make that network, and also having mentors and support from M4s, fellow M4s, when you're M4 or now is M3, all the way through fellows, attendings. PM&R has changed exponentially every single year. What a fellow will tell you may not match what a PGY3 tells you, may not match what we tell you. And so keeping your ears to the ground is essential to know just how those nuances change. And an example of that really quickly is if you speak to a fellow or PGY4 or PGY3, they'll say, oh, I did not do auditions. It wasn't even a thing for us. Nope, not even a thing. And then you talk to PGY2s and interns and they'll say, yeah, I try to do auditions, but, according to the ACGME rules, I can only do one because of COVID. And then our class represents the first class really in PM&R ever to do these many rotations. So a lot of programs were like, oh man, we haven't had students audition here in 3 or 4 years. Wow, we're just getting our bearings. So Keep your ears to the ground, be willing to ask questions, be willing to network. And as Lewis said, closed mouths don't get fed, which is true. As long as you ask for help, you absolutely will make it.
I just want to go off of that a little bit about doing away rotations. I think that they can be incredibly valuable, particularly if, I think in a few things, if you're interested in a program that is out of your state, that is like wondering if you're like really interested in being there. If you're interested in a program that you would just like to get to see what is the culture and want to get and want them to get to know you, I think it can be incredibly valuable to do an away rotation. I did an away at the program that I matched at, and I think it made a huge difference, if I'm being honest, in getting them to see who I was, how I worked, and getting to spend time with the residents, the faculty, getting them to see who I am, was really helpful, I think, for me in matching at Stanford. I would say that Stanford and actually many other programs have scholarships for students who are underrepresented in medicine, where they will pay you like $1,500 or $2,000 or even more. Some programs will pay you even more to actually come out and do an away rotation so that it's affordable. Because for me, that was a huge reason of why I actually ended up doing it. And so it's like, why not? And so I think I would just really emphasize that. Representation in Rehab has like a really helpful resource on like which programs offer those kind of opportunities. And so consider that. But also I remember a resident telling me, just remember that as much as away rotations can help you, they can also hurt you if you don't really work hard, or like, yeah, I don't know, just don't something. If you feel like, okay, I just wouldn't be comfortable being in person, then that's okay too. I don't want to give you so much pressure on that, but I would say if you feel comfortable, it can be really helpful.
Is there anyone else that wanted to jump in and add anything before I ask another question? No. Okay. So I have a question that was kind of a big one when I was applying. So I'm the only Latina in the Stanford PM&R program for a super, super long time, maybe ever. And I felt really uncomfortable applying to PM&R, and I didn't know how friendly some programs would be. So how did you guys figure that out? Just as open to everyone.
I can start. For me, it was kind of first looking at like the roster, looking at the residents that they already had, as well as the faculty, and then like asking the program director during my interview what they were doing for diversity, and like sort of not asking what they thought about it, because everyone would say like, oh, diversity is important, all these things, but asking for like what actions they've done and examples of things they've done to support their residents from diverse backgrounds.
I will add, a lot of the schools are very open to having you contact and speak with current residents. And so if there were any residents who were from underrepresented minorities, I always try to make it a point to speak to them as well, to ask them about their experience and kind of get their insight into how they feel like, if and how they feel like included into their program.
Just a clarifying question. Did you reach out to them? At what time in the cycle did you reach out to talk to residents?
Great question. So I reached out to them during the interview season when I would interview at the program. So this was where, like, I guess this wasn't something that I did to pick which programs I was going to apply to. It was to kind of stratify the programs that I did apply to and kind of rank them that way. So once I apply to a program, if I get an interview, usually a lot of the programs will do like a virtual social. And so we will get to meet some of the residents that way, and they would share their contact information. And then if there wasn't a specific resident that I was interested in speaking with who wasn't there, I would either ask one of the residents who was there, they wouldn't mind sharing their contact information, or maybe the PD when I get a chance to talk to them as well.
Personally, I did something similar, but just a little bit earlier compared to Luis. Around this time last year, I looked at first my school's match list, like where's everyone going, and finding all the PM&R people. I'm from a DO school, and although PM&R is very DO friendly, but there's still a disproportionate amount of MDs and DOs. So like asking my colleagues and friends, which of the places you applied, what were your experiences? Did you do auditions? What were your experiences? And also making a med Twitter. If you guys don't have a med Twitter, please, like tonight, before you go to bed, make a med Twitter. It's absolutely, there's almost no words to describe how like essential it is now, especially with virtual interviews. You'd be surprised like how many program directors are on med Twitter and who are easily accessible by med Twitter and who respond very quickly. One of the program directors that I met first before I did an audition at MedStar Georgetown, and he initially found me on med Twitter. So, make a med Twitter, because you just never know who is looking at you, what opportunities you can have. But it's a long, convoluted way of saying, starting with your school first, seeing who matched in PM&R, speaking to colleagues, using med Twitter, all the easier resources, and starting early so that your relationships are organic from the start. So by the time you get to ERAS season and interview season, you've already been speaking to this new mentor for 9 months, 10 months. They're going to more likely go out of their way for you because you've organically created a relationship.
Nice. Does anyone else have anything else that they would like to add before I ask the next one? No? Okay. So I got one message, a question from the group. If anyone is comfortable sharing, did you have any academic or personal setbacks? And how do you apply with the perceived red flag on your application? I will add 4 things that you perceive as a red flag. Sorry, Luis, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm thinking about it. I would call this a yellow flag, maybe not a red flag. I don't know. So my step 2 score was lower than my step 1 score significantly. And I think for me, both of them were like scored. So that I guess they got to see that. But honestly, I felt like for me, it was about focusing on my strengths rather than kind of really putting all my attention into my weaknesses. And it didn't even get brought up whenever I interviewed. I think especially for PM&R, they really are a lot about trying to do more a holistic review and not focusing just on the numbers. So I will say that for any of you who are on the call who might not have, I don't know, the best grades or did not do that well in STEP, if you have other areas of your application that really shine, don't let those lower scores discourage you, because I'm pretty sure my step 2 score was well below average for like PM&R. So if you have any yellow or red flags, maybe run it by some of the like PM&R people at your school or anybody who's willing to help you, but don't let it discourage you from like applying into a specialty, because if you're well-rounded otherwise, you might be able to still do well. Like I said, I didn't really get asked about that a lot or at all, honestly, but it was something that I was definitely scared about when I was applying.
And I just kind of really quickly like to jump on that. In terms of overcoming, perceived whatever yellow or red flags, one huge thing I think that sometimes gets overlooked, I will say in all of my interviews, if not most of them, step score was never brought up, but your letters are, right? Speaking on how hard you work, like the sports reference, how coachable you are, things like that really do play a role, because that's the person that they're going to want to work with for the next 3 years, 4 years, whatever that may be. So those are things that can really talk about you as a person, you as a constant learner, you as a student, and as a future resident. So I really think that a really, really strong letter can overcome a lot more than you'd realize. And with how holistic some of these applications are reviewed, that can help add to your overall sort of chance at matching.
So if Luis had a yellow flag, I had a burning red I had a burning red flag in the form of failing anatomy, right? Wow, a failing anatomy and matching into PM&R is almost like the polar opposites. And for a variety of like personal reasons, I failed anatomy my first year of medical school, and I ultimately retook it. I did very well in it. I created a tutoring program for it. I created a learning manual for it. Like my trajectory after that was almost like I needed that experience. It changed the way I studied, it changed the way I approached school. It led to a research year, publications, scholarships. Like it was almost unexplainable. But of course, in the moment, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to match? Like, you naturally, when you have a setback, think about all the things that can prevent you from moving forward as opposed to what can. And so what I want to say first and foremost, the entire repertoire, your entire CV and resume is extremely important. So your work experiences, your volunteer experiences, your research experiences, as Sparsh says, your letters of recommendations, your evaluations from your clinical, your rotations are very, very important. But also showing what did you do after that? Because failure is inevitable for all of us. It might not be like a literal F, but it might be in the form of falling short in other ways, and we will. And programs want to see that you can weather the storm, and it can. And in actuality, it makes you a stronger resident because you know how to pick yourself up. So that's me saying whatever it is. First of all, be honest, share with your mentors what your experience was so that they could properly guide you and help you. And also stand in it, like take the time to learn from your mistakes. And like I said, I did an audition at MedStar, Spalding, there's a few others. So I'm here to say how you explain your setback and how you come back from it will absolutely determine your trajectory.
All right, so I'll kind of take over with the next question, and then I guess Janae and Shay, you guys can help answer this next one. But the next question in the chat was, how important is research, and how should you go about finding opportunities?
I'm actually not sure I'd be helpful for this question. So I can probably go on the next one, but I would just say I probably am one of the ones who, I don't know about y'all, but I actually did not have any PM&R related research. I would not advise that, but it was just the way that it was. But I think what made up for that is that's because I took a year to get my master's in public health and did public health related research that I was very passionate about. And I think that showed in my interview and was able to explain why that's important to me as a future physiatrist as well. So yeah, but I did get asked, do you have any PM&R related research? And I was just very honest about that. And like, I engaged in research that I think was valuable for me for these reasons. So I would not make that the the sole advice. So I'm sure everyone else will explain what they did and how they found PM&R related research opportunities.
I may not be the best for this either, but I think, yeah, I also didn't have any publications in PM&R, but I think what's most important is like having, if you can, having research projects that you like took from start to finish, like showing that initiative and being able to like complete the research project, I think is more important than what specialty you do it in. But if you can do research in PM&R, that would definitely be beneficial. And I think for finding advisors or, PIs, what I found helpful was sort of like looking up whoever you thought would be a great advisor and seeing when they last published, so you knew that they'd be someone who would be able to support you to get a publication done before you graduate, that kind of thing. And also just asking around, asking friends about who's a good PI, who isn't, because some are going to be more involved in your research than others. And that can be, having someone less involved can be challenging when you're, it's your first project, you're first starting things off. So yeah, just talking to people, finding out, I guess, who's a good PI, who isn't, and just like asking for advice, I guess, will work out.
Yeah, to add on, I think if you're struggling to find research, you could also like look into PM&R adjacent specialties, whether it's like ortho or neuro, and ask attendings with them if like, hey, can I work on this case report? Can I do this? And then there's also a journal called Rehab and Review, where you can, if you just email them and kind of start getting the communication process going, but essentially you just find any like PM&R article and you just write a very short review on it and you can submit it. And it's essentially just a just too long to read type of journal article you just submit to them. And it's a really easy way to just kind of get something on your app.
Luis, Ashley, any other additions or anything else you guys can add to that question? Okay. Sorry, guys, you guys have a ton of great questions, so I want to try to get to all of them. Ashley and Luis, you guys can kind of jump on this next one. What did you guys do during preclinicals or clinicals to kind of stand out as an applicant? Anything that you guys feel like made you unique on the trail?
Yeah, I think for me, MS2 year here at McGovern, that's when you get a lot of opportunities to kind of take on leadership positions at student organizations. And so I looked for organizations that meant a lot to me. Back when I was in MS2, believe it or not, I didn't know PM&R, a lot about PM&R, so I wasn't pursuing that yet. But I knew that just being a leader and having those skills of managing and working with teams would be very important. And so I sought that out in the different student organizations that I got involved with. Also, something else that was very important for me was like working with underserved and uninsured populations. So that's something else that I got involved in. And so those are organizations that I was able to pick up second year or first and second year of medical school and kind of get very involved with, get very familiar with, and lay a pretty strong foundation. That way, whenever it came around to application cycle, they don't just ask you about what you're doing that year, what you did during third year. They also bring up a lot about the stuff that you did first and second year. And so I was able to really talk about a lot of those experiences and organizations and how they helped me. A lot of questions that you will get asked during interviews are like team building, situational questions. How do you manage stressful situations or conflict and things like that? And I was able to pull a lot from these organizations that I worked at and the issues that we had and the problems that we had to solve.
I don't really have much to add except for I agree with everything that was said, and just emphasis on organizations that you're passionate about. It's better to have been a part of, let's say, three organizations at your medical school, or in and around your community, in which you did strong work for, versus you were the secretary of like 10 organizations, and it's kind of scattered as to like what were your reasons for doing it. So just making sure you're passionate about what you're doing, and it makes answering interview questions so much easier, because if you're passionate, you're really speaking from the heart and doesn't feel as rehearsed. So yeah.
All right, thanks y'all. Next question is, with interviews kind of being online, how did you guys approach getting a good feel for the program you might spend the next 4 years at if you haven't been there in person? I could just quickly add to that I thought one really beneficial thing is residents. Just you would be really surprised at how just willing people are to talk about their program, talk about their experiences there. Honestly, if you reach out to them. So that to me was a really helpful way. I don't know if anybody had any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just want to second that residents are really, really helpful and very willing to speak to you. Like there were multiple people that I spoke with for more than like 30 minutes. I think one poor resident I spoke with for like an hour about their experience at their program. And so we started talking about like buying houses and stuff because I have a baby and they have kids. So yeah, everybody is very, very, PM&R were very friendly in the field. So they're more than willing to share, and you'll be surprised, they'll like be very honest and talk about some of the stuff they don't like about the program, and you should definitely ask them about that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add on asking your genuine questions, not questions you think you should be asking. Like for Luis, for example, like if you do have kids, I don't, but I do remember a lot of people on the interview trail who did, asking about or who wanted to have kids in residency, asking about paternity and maternity leave. Like, what does that look like for your program? Asking questions like, what happens when someone doesn't pass their boards for the first time? How are they supported? Like really, I think asking these real questions that help you get an idea of like, what is the support like? Specifically asking questions for you if you have a certain disability, asking like, how do you support students with this, for example? Like just being very honest with that, I think can give you a great idea of if you would feel comfortable at that program. I think it's a lot more difficult when you ask when I asked very like surface level questions that really actually didn't tell me much, but I just wanted to be kind, wasn't like as helpful.
All right, next one, guys, is we usually hear about making connections, and it's important at conferences, DMing PD, Med Twitter, but what should we talk about or ask about? Is it ask about their program, compatibility with the program, research opportunities, or mentorship? I think Janae kind of mentioned a little bit about that, but if anybody else has something to add on that about how to make connections, especially in person at some of these places.
I would say just having a conversation. You know, sometimes you gain information just by, you know, having a regular conversation that doesn't necessarily have like, you know, all these questions you need answered. For one, you know, hi, my name is Ashley. I'm a fourth year from PCOM. I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you for leading the way in the field, and like just having that organic conversation. But if you do have specific questions, like Janae said, asking those questions, being honest, and making sure you're asking questions that can't be easily answered by the website. You know, there's a lot that can be answered by the website and also by residents. So just do a little bit of due diligence before you go up to a program director, because, you know, one thing you guys are probably learning about medicine, especially your third year, people's attention span is dwindling. Our attention span is it's finite, you know? So when you have someone's attention, you want to make sure what you're saying counts, and they're going to remember who you are, because every time you speak, you're saying something that's meaningful, saying something that's exciting, saying something that's profound. So if you don't have anything to say, just say hi, and, you know, solely keep in contact, you know, little by little, showing your face. You know, that's how you create that relationship. And of course, asking the questions that you do have.
Awesome. Next question was, this is a great question. About letters of rec, do all your letters come from physiatrists? I can speak on, you know, my experience really quick. I ended up submitting 3 letters. I know there's a huge debate about 3 versus 4. I ended up submitting 3. I really think the strength of your letters is more important than, it being from 3 PM&R. I ended up having 2 PM&R, 1 internal medicine. And really just them being strong letters was kind of the recommendation I got, and that I felt worked best. But I don't know if anyone else had any other experiences on that.
I was stressing about not being able to get a like I am letter during my sub-I, because I did a geriatrics palliative sub-I, and so I wasn't able to so I got a geriatrician to write me a letter, and that worked just fine. So I did that, and then I was fortunate enough to have 3 PM&R letters, but I think that's the exception, not the rule. I was just lucky enough to have like somebody offer to write one that I wasn't expecting, but don't feel like you need. I asked this exact same question last year when I was starting the application cycle, and the recommendation was like, if you get 1 really good PM&R letter, that's good. If you can get a second one, that's great, but you don't need more than that. If you have people from other specialties or other ways, other connections that can also really speak about your character and your work ethic and who you are as a person, that know you really well, I would say those would be more impactful than just getting another PM&R letter from someone who you worked with for like 2 days or something like that. So look for those people who can really advocate for you and really speak on your behalf, because those are the letters that are really, really going to stand out.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'll go. To kind of follow like with the theme of just getting good quality letters of recs, like I had 2 PM&R and then I had 1 OB-GYN letter, just completely out of the blue, and kind of a wild card one. But I just had a really great relationship with my attending, and she was able to write a really strong letter. And actually, I had like some residents during the interview like, hey, we want to kind of read your letter back to you, and they got to like read it. And I'm like, oh, cool, that's such a strong letter. Yeah. Regardless, I think just the rule of thumb is just quality over quantity.
All right, next one is, could any of y'all discuss your experience during your second year with coursework, board studying? How did you guys make the connections? Kind of what other extracurriculars were you guys involved in alongside that?
Like just what extracurriculars were involved in?
Yes, and just kind of balancing that with your coursework and second year with board studying.
Okay. I would say be conservative with how much you're involved in, because your wellness and your ability to take the amount of time you need for studying is actually really important. Probably more important than having your second year be full of activities. There are other years, if you need more time to study, there are other years when you can be involved in activities. But my second year, I chose one thing and I decided to be an anatomy tutor. I didn't really know much about physiatry at the time. It ended up actually being a really helpful thing that I chose to do for applying into PM&R, but I just genuinely liked teaching. And I feel like some programs just asked about my teaching experience. So that was the one thing that I chose to do, and it actually took up a lot of my time. So I would say, you can maybe choose one thing that you are really, really interested in. Maybe your capacity is more, but I was very conservative because I needed more space for studying.
I wish I had Janae in my ear during the first half of second year to not spread myself so thin. I was very, very, very involved throughout medical school. I don't regret it, but I do think that at some point you have to, I lied. There are moments where I regret it from a sense, but in terms of what I was able to do, I don't regret it. But I will say, similar to what Janae is saying, you do have to focus on your exams, whether it's complex, step, or both. That is a conversation for another day as to whether or not to take both and all these things. But by the time you get to, let's say, February or March, everything has got to go, because you really have to focus on your exam. So, and most orgs, to my knowledge at least, they begin transitioning out into new leadership and new e-boards well before that, January, early February. So, during that time transition, be okay with just studying. And that's hard for us as medical students, right? We're used to doing a million things. We're someone's daughter, we're someone's cousin, we're someone's friend. Like, we're used to just, doing a million things, but getting okay with that stillness and just putting your focus on exams only is important, but still have outlets. So if you're a gym person, I'm a gym person, me and the gym were like two peas in a pod, even more so during boards. If you're an outdoor runner, whatever it is, you still need an outlet so that you don't just obsessively, go after it. So definitely tone down all your activities, but stay tuned in the things that keep you sane and keep you whole.
Thanks, y'all. One question, sorry, my apologies, I skipped over. It's kind of similar to another question that I actually just got. How would one navigate this process? I think the panelists that this relates to can definitely chime in. How would you guys navigate this process, or how did you navigate this process if your school does not have a home program, in terms of like just forming the connections and the exposure?
I can chime in on this one. So I go to Midwestern University in Downers Grove, and yeah, we don't have any PM&R faculty attending any department or anything. And so we did have like a student interest group, and I think that's one way to start. But one thing I didn't like about our student interest group was just very infrequent meetings, like every other month. Some random attending would just come in and just talk, but I felt like I couldn't get a true sense of what PM&R was about just with that frequency. And so I reached out to kind of programs within the Chicagoland area, like Northwestern and Rush, and to kind of get involved in their interest groups. And because they have PM&R departments and residency programs there, their student interest group was like kind of well established and connected within their residency programs. And as a result, there was just a lot more opportunities to get involved. Like specifically at Rush, they had a lot of volunteer opportunities with residents and their organizations. And so, and I guess that's kind of, if that helps answer the question, just kind of reach out to the programs in your area and to see what you can. And I think the biggest rule of thumb for me was I cold called, cold emailed so many people, so many programs, and I got some things and it helped out. And yeah, just gotta shoot your shot.
The next one is did you all continue with your research and other activities following ERAS submission? And did you update all programs you applied to regarding these new developments? I could quickly chime in. I didn't update them. Kind of whatever I had done up to that point, I had put on my application. I don't see it making a huge difference, to be honest, especially because right when ERAS submission kind of opens to programs, they're going to start reviewing as is. So I don't feel like it'll make a huge difference, but I don't know if anyone has different thoughts on that.
Same. I didn't update anything, but do not drop all of your stuff just because you've submitted your application. That's not good manners. Continue with what you're doing, finish up whatever you have to do, and then move on with your life. Don't be the person that just like, oh, I've submitted, or oh, I've interviewed, I'm done. Unless that's what you like set up with your PI or whoever else you're working with. But otherwise, finish whatever you started. If you feel like it's significant enough, or if you feel like it's really going to make a difference to your application, you can update it. Maybe I honestly don't know what the process is for that, but I just didn't think it was worth going through that trouble.
If someone else wants to answer this question, after interviews, did you guys stay in contact or reach out to PDs or residents until match?
I can I can answer this one. I reached out to a couple residents just with like questions I had about the city and like things that hadn't been addressed during the interview, things like that. And maybe one or two PDs. I think it's good, like it shows interest if you reach out after your interview. I think one thing I had trouble with was like figuring out what questions to ask, like what were meaningful questions. So I guess just yeah, I don't have advice on what meaningful questions you should ask are, but I think reaching out afterwards is a good idea to just show interest.
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick that once you interview, you're gonna find out that there's so many wonderful, amazing PM&R programs across the country. And so even if you are not going to end up, I mean, you can only end up at one program, right? But you might be inspired by physicians from other programs that you either interviewed with or that they might be the PD residents, whatever. And I think it's like fair game to keep in touch with them if that's what you want to do. That's definitely what I did with specific physicians that I really liked the work that they were doing, or if there were any specific questions that I had, because we share common interests or common backgrounds and things like that.
I agree completely. Definitely following up with the genuine people and the genuine relationships you created, because it's easy to feel like I got to follow up because of interviews. But remember, these are your colleagues for the rest of your life, so there's never a loss in follow up. But in terms of specifically for interviews, I followed up with residents from programs that I interviewed with early in the interview season, where I'm like, oh man, it's like January. My interview was in November. Do they still love me? Do they love me at all? Like you start going back and forth, as to like, do they remember you and all these things? And so those are the ones that I reached out to more, versus the end of the interview season is January. And if I had an interview in January, then there'd be less of a need. So just kind of looking at it from that point of view.
I just want to add that for me, I tried to limit post-interview communication because we had a lot of interviews because we also have to interview for prelim and TYs as well as for PM&R. And so I just felt like this is a lot of interviews, if I'm being honest. So what I chose to do was just send to every program I sent a thank you note right after my interview. If either to the program director, if I actually interacted with them, or to the person who interviewed me, if the program said it was okay, if they do not want you to interview, to say that, if they say they do not want you to reach out to them, do not reach out to them, follow instructions. That's a part of them evaluating you. But if they allowed me to, I would ask, can I send a thank you note after? And if they said yes, then I would do that. And it would, have maybe a couple sentences about what I really appreciated about my conversation with that person, about the program, so that it was, genuine. But that's really it. And then once I figured out which program I wanted to rank first, I sent them a letter of interest. That's really was my post-interview communication, outside of when, like, around the time of ranking, I had genuine questions that I didn't ask earlier. And I was like, wait, what is this? What is this? What is this? But I really kept it kind of to thank you notes and my letters of interest, because I just thought that we had so many interviews, it was too much.
All right. Next question is did you guys expect to match where you did based on the interview experience and intersections? Example, did programs give you a sense that they were strongly considering you? I really like this question.
Sparsh, sorry, what was the question?
The question was did you guys expect to match where you did based on interview experience or intersections? Did programs give you a strong sense, or a sense that they were strongly considering you?
I guess I can add on to this. I would preface that I have many friends who were misled by programs saying that they were interested in them and then did not match there. So I would honestly take it with a grain of salt. Because when a program says that they are interested in you, it doesn't really say where they're ranking you. Like I think it can be encouraging, and I would take it as like, yeah, like I did a great job, and like let it boost your confidence. But I wouldn't make no assumptions. Granted, my experience was that once I did my OA at Stanford, I got a lot of great feedback on how I did. They made an evaluation for me for that rotation, and it was really strong. It was a really strong evaluation, but I still took that with a grain of salt. So that's would be my recommendation, just because just communication from programs can be really tricky.
Janae, well said. I agree completely. Just a quick addition is, as much as I hate the Excel spreadsheet that gives you like all of this data, the one thing that it is good for is just being able to have an idea of like what programs are saying to people. And so, for example, if a program has 6 seats, but they send out 12 love letters, the math doesn't math. I mean, maybe they do. I'm sure they love you because they're telling you. But the point is, to Janae's point, where did you fall on that rank list? And so, absolutely taking it with a grain of salt, for sure.
Yeah, and I'll add, one of my advisors told me not to let their love letters affect your rank list. Like, really rank the program that you really like, rather than just basing it off of like, oh, they sent me this email, so I should rank them higher, kind of thing.
Well said, everyone. I agree wholeheartedly. Next question was and sorry guys, I know I'm trying to filter through some of the questions. So if you guys direct message me, I'll hopefully try to get you an answer. Just kind of because we're running low on time. I'd be happy to stay after. If some of the panelists have other things to do, feel free to hop off. But if you guys are staying, that would be great too. With the next question is, with pass fail boards and not having a score to go off of, I'm struggling to assess how competitive an applicant I am. Do you think there is any stat that was brought up more during your interview, whether that be GPA, rotation, pass versus honors, research, or volunteering?
I think they asked a lot about leadership experiences in the different organizations that you were a part of, kind of trying to assess like your passion for these projects and the things that you were a part of, and then letters of recommendation, as Sparsh mentioned earlier today. That I had multiple programs that they started off the interview by just saying, yo, great letters of rec. So I think that definitely makes a difference. And not everybody's gonna have the opportunity to like get a letter of recommendation from like someone that's like huge in PM&R, like a big name or whatever. But even if it's a very strong letter from someone that might not be as known, they still take note of that and they will remember that. Because again, these people are talking about your character, your work ethic, who you are as a person, and how valuable you will be as a resident. So I think letters of rec, those are very important.
Other question is, do you all have any personal suggestions on the personal statement to kind of help make it stand out, or what should maybe be avoided in a personal statement? I really like this question. I think as you guys approach application season, unfortunately, none of us have mentioned it, but just as important as those letter of recommendations are, that personal statement, can really, really help you stand out. This field is really trying to sift out who is committed, who knows, funny enough, who knows what PM&R is. And a lot of times people apply to this specialty without knowing what it is. And your personal statement is the first way to kind of know that. So.
The one advice that I got for that was to try to take this opportunity to really talk about yourself and your experiences and make it unique. You do not want it to be like a generic personal statement that like, what is it, Chat GPT or whatever that thing is called can make. Like you really want it to talk about your experiences and what you can bring to the table and how you're going to be a great resident. There's a lot of, with the sub app, you can include a lot of your experiences and your extracurriculars on that. But I think in the personal statement, you can talk about how those experiences and organizations really helped you and help develop you. And then patient encounters are always welcomed, as long as, again, they can really bring a lot of, strength to your personal statement, depending on how it's written. But somebody made a joke about how like PM&R personal statements is either like a sports injury that you had, or like a family member that had like a stroke or something like that. And I mean, these are things that happen, right? And that might be the reason why you want to go into PM&R, but it's about how you word it and how you make it unique and how you make it stand out. You don't want people to read it and then be like, okay, I've seen this before. You want to try to find a way to make it stand out.
To add to that, definitely have multiple people read your personal statement, but not too many. Like you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen because everyone has a different opinion. But for me, my lucky number was 5. I had a PGY, I had an intern, a 2, a 3, a fellow, no, a 2, a 3, a fellow, and an attending, and my twin sister. And the great irony in this, in what I'm about to say is, everyone in PM&R, they gave me feedback. We did several drafts. They loved it. But it was my twin sister that upended my whole personal statement. She's like, Ashley, I know you, and your passion is not coming out in this personal statement. I had my twin sister read it because she too is in medicine. And so make sure you have someone who's both in the field, but someone who knows you. And I think it's really hard to talk about yourself. We're used to just putting your head down. You want your work to speak for your work, but it's like a fine balance in interview season, or I'm sorry, ERAS season, between staying humble, but advocating for yourself. You have to talk about who you are. You have to talk about your accomplishments. You have to talk about why they should choose you. It's almost like you, if not now, then when, if not you, then who? So just make sure you have a lot of people, or a decent amount of people read your personal statement, trusted people, and also push yourself to advocate.
All right. We probably have time for maybe 1, 2 more questions. But I again, I'll be happy to stay on for a little longer. Another question was, and everybody can kind of chime in on this. What is the number of interviews to have? I guess I could start this one. So we're getting into that point now where it might be the third virtual cycle. So I feel like the first virtual cycle, people were still probably applying how they would in person. Then there started to be this trend, right? The next year was, more than that, not a huge jump. Our year, a lot more than that. So, compared to 2 years ago, quite a big jump. I would say that it really depends on the person, and I know it's not the clearest answer. I think that unfortunately, there were people with double-digit interviews that didn't end up matching that I had heard of. So I don't think it's a number per se. It is the quality of those interviews. It is the quality of the program and the impact that you made. I know stories where someone ranked 4 places and ended up matching, or 5. So really looking at realistically how strong of an impact did you make while I was on that away rotation, and kind of sifting it out that way. But I don't know if someone else has any thoughts.
I would just say, I don't know if next year they're going to be virtual as well, but Zoom fatigue is a real thing. Especially if you're having like your PM&R interviews and your like prelim, IM transitional year interviews. It can be a lot. Like by the end of the season in January, I was like dragging my feet to that computer to do these interviews. So keep that into consideration as you're kind of selecting how many you're planning on doing. Even like how many you're going to do in 1 week. I had 1 week, I think I did 3. And with the socials, I was basically like busy every day. And I was like, oh man, I was getting these schools mixed up. I had to make sure I got the names right and I wasn't confusing the PDs and stuff. So just be careful. Choose wisely, think about wellness, and yeah, Zoom fatigue is real. So keep that in mind.
Also, just a quick aside about interviews. If you're on an audition, make sure you let someone know like relatively early that, hey, it's interview season. I might get an interview invite. Is it okay that I step away? Because some people, medicine is so busy. People forget like interview season is in October and November. There's so much going on. So as much as you want to be there for that patient encounter or do whatever else, like getting that interview is most important. You need to step away by any means necessary. Like get to a computer, get your phone out. And this is not to give you anxiety, but the interviews virtually fill up very quickly and less people are dropping them because, most people can attend it virtually. You don't have to fly or go there. So an aside for when it's time to make sure you are asking ahead of time, taking the time to select those interviews and just being prepared for that.
All right. Probably the last 2 questions we'll have time for. Hello, thank you all for great advice. When applying to a 3 versus 4 year program, how should a personal statement be written to kind of focus on applying to that transitional or prelim year?
So because you'll be applying to advanced programs and prelim/TY programs, it's at least what I did was for every PM&R program, I had a personal statement for all of the PM&R programs, whether they were 3 years, which is advanced, or whether they were 4 years, meaning categorical. But then I also had a medicine personal statement. And I think maybe we did things differently, but I actually made a completely different personal statement for my medicine /TY. They were the same letter, but they were the same statement. But I sent that. So my PM&R letter was going to be sent to the PM&R program, whether it was 3 or 4 years, because even if they do include the medicine year,
if they're categorical, if they're a 4-year program, they know that you want to go really into PM&R. So that should be the focus. You can send your PM&R letter to the 3 and the 4-year programs is what I'm saying. I don't think you need to change up, like, I don't think you need to adjust your personal statement based on if it's a 3 or a 4-year program, based on if it includes the medicine year. Because they may include it, but they're like, you're there for PM&R. It's the difference really is when you're applying to a 1-year medicine or TY program. That is when you should have like a medicine based or TY based statement.
I'll say I was a little different in that I used the same personal statement for my PM&R as well as my prelim programs. So I guess maybe talk to your faculty advisor about it and find out like what your school does and like what they would advise. Yeah.
All right. Last question. And thank you all for showing up, and these amazing panelists. They shine, and really hope that this really helped all of y'all. But last question, considering how competitive PM&R is, did any of the panelists or any of y'all consider dual applying to another specialty as well? Is this recommended one way or another?
I think this is a very personal question and very dependent on you. Do you feel like you'll be happy in a different specialty? I know some of us might feel like this is a specialty for us and would rather like wait an extra year to apply to like the next psych or something like that. But for some of us, that might not be an option, and we really need to get this job and start making that money. And we might see ourselves working in a different specialty. So I think that's very dependent on who you are, what your goals are, what you want to do. I had friends that were like interested in like sports medicine, but they were like, oh, I can do that in family medicine. I can do that in PM&R. I can do that in emergency. So they were kind of looking at those options. So it just really depends on who you are as a person, what your goals are, and what your priorities are.
Yeah, I agree. I had a very close, one of my classmates did dual apply. It's completely okay if you think, I just want to make sure that if you speak to your mentors for sure, because your mentors, especially even if you just have one, even if they're not like, hopefully PM&R related, but even if they're just someone involved in admissions in a program who can kind of look at your application and help you to assess, like, are you competitive, I guess, enough to apply into one specialty, can be really helpful, because there's no shame in like dual applying to another program if you're just like, I need a job and I want to make sure that I match. Also, it can be really helpful if you're unsure about 2 different specialties. Like I was in between internal medicine, like just internal medicine, and PM&R. And I did not dual apply because I was already like, we already have prelim applications with PM&R, but looking back, I actually wish I would have, because by September, I still hadn't made up my mind and applications were due. And I think going through the interviews, maybe for category, like fully internal medicine versus fully PM&R, maybe would have helped me to see like, well, actually, which specialty do I see myself more in? I think looking back now, I'm like, I still wish I would have. So I think maybe speak to your mentors and figure out like what's best for you. Yeah.
I agree with what everyone said, and just to reiterate what Louis said, which is, the only person who really knows deep down like what you need is you. So if you know, okay, at the end of the day, I have a family, like Janae said, and Janae saying that, if you need a job and you have a family or things to, you just want to get your life started, that's perfectly okay. But if you know deep down that you'd be happiest as a physiatrist, it is, in my personal opinion, it is better to, and God forbid, not match and reapply and have the next 20, 30 years as a physiatrist than to enter a specialty, you don't like it, and then, be miserable. I know 2 people actually who are on their second residency, One did family med, didn't like it, and then now she's doing OB-GYN. You know, that's a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of resources to, I don't want to say waste, because I'm sure their ability to treat their patients are probably enhanced because of their background. But again, a very personal decision for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, to all the panelists, Shay, Janae, Ashley, Luis, Chandan. Y'all are rock stars. I cannot wait to be in the field with y'all, hopefully run into y'all in conferences. Congrats again. And to all the people who joined us, thank you so much for giving your time this evening to chat with us. And if you guys have any questions at all, I'd be happy to share my Twitter handle, my email with any questions. I know this is a very, very tough process, stressful time, but I'm telling you, all of y'all are amazing. You guys will do really well. Just be yourselves, be true, and work as hard as you can. And if anyone else has some closing remarks, I'll hand it over to Roxy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I am so incredibly proud of each and every one of you. Seriously, I just don't even, really, really just incredibly proud. And super excited to see you all in person at future physiatry conferences, and so glad we will all be colleagues in the future. Seriously. I was hoping if you feel comfortable turning on your camera, I was hoping for a group picture that we will put on our social, and then this recording will be up later. So please turn on your camera, and then I will let you know when I take the screenshot. Thank you. Oh, it's so nice seeing everyone's faces. We are also going to make public our leadership app hopefully by this week. We said it was going to be last week, hopefully by this week. Thank you, everyone, for turning on your camera. And if you don't feel comfortable, totally and completely understand. So I am going to just take the first group here. So smile. You probably don't know what group you're in, but just smile anyway. Thank you. And then I'm going to take the second group. Don't forget that we do have